This summer, I've been preaching through the book of Daniel. Not this morning. We'll come back to it next Sunday. But I want you to find John's Gospel, John chapter 1. We're going to look at John chapter 1. And let me just do another awkward interruption to the message. So we almost never get to have her in the sanctuary, but that's Pastor Rochelle. So, Pastor Rochelle has served Grace Church for quite some time now. And as children's pastor, she's always with the kids, and occasionally we have the kids in with us. And she's always filling holes all over the church. So if there's an empty spot, often she fills in those places. So she doesn't get to come in here a lot. So when she pops up like whack-a-mole, we want to say, hey, there's Pastor Rochelle. So Rochelle, we're glad that you're here this morning. And on behalf of the church, thank you for what you do. Several weeks ago, I went to a conference called PalCon. I may have mentioned it a couple weeks ago. PalCon is a Church of the Nazarene conference for pastors and leaders. It's been going on for a long, long time, since back in the 70s. I think my dad went to PalCon back in the day. Some of you are in ministry and have participated in stuff like that. But I was a part of a group of a couple of hundred pastors at Trevecca just a few weeks ago. And in that, we had big sessions where everybody was in, and then we had small sessions where you could kind of choose where you wanted to go. And I got to lead one of the smaller sessions with a couple of pastor friends of mine on AI, on artificial intelligence. I am not an expert on artificial intelligence at all. What we were talking about was how do we, or can we, or should we, how should we use it in ministry? In other words, what you don't want me to do is go to ChatGPT on Saturday night and say, oh, dude, I've got to preach from Daniel chapter 5 tomorrow. Give me a 22.5 minute sermon with 3 illustrations and make one of them cool, because I'm cool like that. You know, you don't want me doing that. You don't want me leaning back and not, praying about it and listening for the Lord to help and guide us. You don't want me doing that, but it's a tool. It's a tool, and we can use it. So a couple of weeks ago, I got to, with a couple of other pastors, lead this breakout session on using artificial intelligence in ministry. In the session was a young pastor. He's deep into his 40s now. Was a young pastor who had been a teenager in Alabama when I was a youth pastor in Alabama. He wasn't in my youth group. He was just from a church on our district. So I knew him. Every once in a while, he and his sister would come to our church and they'd go to youth group with us. Every once in a while, I'd see him at camps. When we did TNT and all those district type events, Daryl and his sister were a part of our group. And so I got to know him a little bit, mostly back in the late 90s and up until about 2003. I'm going someplace with this. Hang in there. I'm getting there. In the PalCon thing a couple of weeks ago, as I was sharing my part, I made a reference to bowling. I don't know where it came from, but I was talking about using AI, and I was saying when we talk about ministry and when we talk about using AI, it's not that we're saying you can never go bowling. It's you should know where the gutters are. You should know where the boundaries are. This is good and right and proper, but if you get too far over here, you fall in the gutter, so to speak. Do you get where I was headed with that? This is right and proper. This is out of bounds. So Daryl, the kid I knew from 20-something years ago, Daryl came up to me after. He's been a pastor for 15 years. Afterward, he came up to me and he goes, wow. Rich Cook makes a sports illustration and doesn't talk about hockey. Now, I know that makes no sense to you, really, but let me give you a little context. In the 90s, all I thought about was hockey. I focused on it. I watched it. I followed it. I knew the stats. I collected hockey cards like a 9-year-old. I would take my $1 to Walmart, get a couple of packs of hockey cards, sit down on our living room floor as a newly married man and make piles. You know, these are the Red Wings, these are the Blackhawks, these are the Bruins, these are the Flyers. And I would fixate on hockey. And here's the weird thing. This kid, Daryl, who's been in ministry for 15 years, who I have not laid eyes on in about 25 years, he remembers from the 90s that I talked about hockey. How obnoxious was I? That a kid who did not go to my church remembers from 20 years back how much I talked about hockey. Yesterday, I was preaching on Daniel chapter 5 this morning. And Dana and I got to spend a few days in Pigeon Forge with our family, our little one Grant, and our older one Jackson, and Jackson's wife, and our grandkids. We got to spend a few days in Pigeon Forge together. And we were driving home yesterday. And I felt the Lord say, that's good, do that next Sunday, but I want you to preach something else tomorrow. And so this is what I got for you today. I want you to open up your Bibles to John chapter 1. And let me ask you this. How many of you have read the book Theo of Golden? Has anybody read the book Theo of Golden? Has anybody? Nobody in the room? Okay, in first service we had several. This is the book Theo of Golden. Okay, written by a guy named Alan Levi. Alan Levi I believe he was a lawyer and a songwriter and now an author. This is his first book. He's in his 70s. He self-published it about 3 years ago. You know what self-publishing means? He couldn't get anybody to publish it. Okay, he wrote a book and nobody would publish it, so he did it on his own. And he paid to have copies of his book printed and published. And then it caught fire a little bit. And last year, in 2025, the book kind of caught fire, got on the bestsellers list. Everybody who has a book club started sharing this book. And now a bunch of people have read this book. Somebody from our church 3 weeks ago this morning, somebody in our church said, Rich, have you read Theo of Golden? I said, I have not heard of Theo of Golden. And he said, you've got to read this book, and when you're done reading it, I'd like to talk to you about it. Now, let me tell you what I usually read. I usually read fiction books about Vikings or Jason Bourne, or Matt Dillon is on Mars and we've got to save him. Not Matt Dillon. Who? Matt Damon. Matt Dillon was a guy from the 80s, wasn't he? Yeah. So I read books about World War II. I read books about being behind enemy lines. The Nazis are coming and we've got to do this and we've got to do this. And heroes. I read kind of action stuff, suspenseful stuff. That's not what this book is. This book is about an 86-year-old Portuguese man who comes into a small town called Golden, Georgia, and sits in a coffee shop surrounded by pencil-drawn portraits. 90-something portraits are on the wall. And he starts to look at these portraits, and he wonders about the people in the portraits, and he starts making connections around town. And it's like a 13-hour audiobook. No explosions, no Nazis, no Vikings. It is not the kind of book I read. I said in first service, it's a chick book. And then I was told, you can't say that. But I'm doubling down. It's a chick book. And a dude in our church read it and told me, Rich, you got to read this book. And I did. And I got to tell you, I'm man enough to tell you, on the way home yesterday from Pigeon Forge, Grant's in the back seat, Dana's in the passenger seat. I'm listening to this book on my earbuds, and I'm going, you know. It's a beautiful story. It's a beautiful story. I'm not recommending a book this morning. It's not about the book, okay? If you'd like to talk about the book, I'll talk about the book. But it's not about the book. It's that somebody read it and shared it with me. They say that the gospel spreads like this. It's one beggar telling another beggar where to find bread. That's what the gospel is. As a youth pastor, somebody else pulled this off one time, real hot, awful summer, awful day. He got a huge cooler full of those ice pops, just a little piece of plastic with colored Kool-Aid in it. He froze them up and he put them in a big cooler back behind the building and then told one kid. And so the kid goes back and what is teenager does? He gets like 6 ice pops and they're sticking out of his pockets. And he comes around, he's, everybody's hot and slayed, and he's got ice pops in his pocket. And hey, where'd you get that? Oh, in the cooler. And the word spreads. That's kind of the gospel. In the Gospel of John, in John chapter 1, I want you to read with me. John chapter 1, starting in verse 35. Very early on, as Jesus is just now coming and starting his public ministry, his cousin John the Baptist, we meet early on in John chapter 1. And then in verse 35, the next day, John the Baptist, the next day, John was there again with 2 of his disciples. John had disciples. John had those that were following him and learning from him. And John saw Jesus. When John saw Jesus passing by, John said, "Look, the Lamb of God." And when the 2 disciples heard him say this, they followed Jesus. They were followers of John, and now they've seen Jesus and they're following Jesus. Turning around, Jesus saw them following and said, "What do you guys want?" I mean, that's not maybe how he said it, but that's what's written in the Word, the Bible. "What do you want?" And they said, "Rabbi," which means teacher, "where are you staying?" And Jesus said, "Come and you'll see." So they went and they saw where he was staying and they spent that day with him. Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, was one of the 2 who heard what John had said and who had followed Jesus. The first thing Andrew did was find his brother Simon. Did you guys pick up on that? Andrew sees Jesus. The first thing Andrew does is go and he tells his brother. Why? Because we talk about what we're excited about. We'll talk more about that in a second. We talk about what we're excited about. Why did somebody tell me about Theo of Golden? Because they had read it and they liked it or they hated it and wanted to inflict it on me. But they liked it, they appreciated it, they thought I might like it, and they told me about it. First thing Andrew did was find his brother Simon and said, "We found the Messiah." And he brought him to Jesus. Jesus looked at him and said, "You are Simon, son of John. You'll be called Cephas," which when translated is Peter. The next day, Jesus decided to leave that place for Galilee. And finding Philip, he looked at Philip and says, "Follow me." So what does Philip do? Philip, like Andrew and Peter, was from the town of Bethsaida. Philip found Nathanael and told him, "We found the one Moses wrote about in the law, about who the prophets wrote, Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph." We've been searching for the Messiah. We found him. It's Jesus of Nazareth. Nazareth? Exclamation point, question mark. "Can anything good come from there?" Nathanael said. And Philip just said, "Come check it out. Come and see." Don't believe me? Come and see. When Jesus saw Nathanael approaching, he said of him, here truly is an Israelite in whom there is no deceit. And Nathanael said, dude, we've never met. How do you know me? Jesus said, I saw you while you were still under the fig tree before Philip even came up on you. I've seen you. I know you. And Nathanael declared, Rabbi, you are the Son of God. You're the King of Israel. We talk about the things we're excited about. Andrew meets Jesus and immediately goes and gets his brother. Philip is called to follow Jesus and immediately goes and tells somebody else. It's not just unique here in John chapter 1. Think about in John chapter 4. We looked at John earlier this year, the woman at the well. Jesus has this interaction with this woman, this Samaritan woman at the well. And after a time with Jesus, she goes into town and says, hey, everybody, come meet a man that has told me everything that I ever did. Come, you've got to meet this guy. Well, what does he believe about this? I don't know. You've got to meet him. Where does he come from? Where did he go to school? I have no idea. You've got to come and meet him. Come meet a man that told me everything I ever did. The demon-possessed man in Luke chapter 8. Remember him? The crazy naked guy from the graveyard? He wants to follow Jesus after Jesus heals him. He wants to follow Jesus, and Jesus sent him home and say, go and tell your friends, tell your family how much the Lord has done for you. And he did. The man born blind in John chapter 9 immediately starts getting in trouble because they've got an axe to grind with Jesus. So they're asking him all these questions, and he said, I don't know anything. All I know is I used to be blind, and now I can see. In Luke chapter 5, Jesus calls Matthew a tax collector, a traitor, working for the Romans. And what does Matthew do? Right after Jesus has this interaction and invites him to follow, Jesus invites him to follow him, and Matthew invites all of his rowdy friends over to have a party at his house so they can get to know Jesus. On the night Jesus was born, the angels appeared to whom? The shepherds out on the hillside, just a bunch of shepherds. The angel appears, and the angel says, go and tell. And they went and they told. What did they tell? There were angels. What did the angels say? The angels said that the Son of David, the Messiah, has been born. Well, what does that mean? We don't know. Where did the angels come from? I don't know. What does this mean? I don't know. Does this mean that we're free from the Romans? I have no idea. What did they tell? They just went and told what they had seen and what they had experienced. What did I talk about in the 90s? Apparently, hockey. I don't talk to you guys a lot about hockey. You know what I talk about? Donuts. And buffalo wings. June Dana, Little Debbie's. Oh, you guys, last year, you all bought me so many boxes of Little Debbie Christmas tree cakes. Can we please not do that this year? The first several boxes were awesome. But I went through them all. I ate them all. I gave away a few individuals here and there. Hey, random teenage kid, would you like a Christmas tree cake? But I ate most of them. Let's not do that this year. I appreciate the sentiment. I talk about stuff that I get excited about. So do you. If you follow me on Facebook, I am most annoying on Facebook when it comes to 80s culture. When it's Ferris Bueller's Day Off, I tell you. When it's Sloth from the Goonies' birthday, everybody needs to know that. When it's the anniversary of Tom Petty releasing Running Down a Dream, we all need to know about that. So we're all known for something. Andrew sees Jesus and immediately tells his brother. Philip is asked to follow Jesus, immediately tells his friend Nathanael. Matthew is invited to follow Jesus and immediately has his friends over. The shepherds out on the hillside, all they know is that there were angels. Well, what does this mean? We don't know. What's the significance? We don't know. Which Old Testament prophecy does this fulfill? We're not sure. Well, what do you know? There were angels. And they told us that there was going to be a baby, and we went and we saw a baby, and the angel said it was the Christ child. It's the Messiah. Well, how do we know? I don't know. But they shared it. And I read a book about an 86-year-old Portuguese man in a small southern town that has an appreciation for pencil portraits in a coffee shop because somebody in this church said, "Have you read Theo with Golden?" So in first service, I said, "How many of you read Theo with Golden?" So about 7 or 8 or 9 people had read it, and I had them raise their hands. And I said, if you had 50 guesses, you wouldn't guess who recommended it to me. Because as I said before, I'm pretty sure it's a chick book. And Brian Randolph, some of you all know Brian and Kelly. Brian recommended it to me. This is not my kind of book. But he suggested it to me, and I read it, and it spoke to me. It did. It's a beautiful story. This isn't a book recommendation, but it's a beautiful story, and I'm glad he recommended it. I will reread it, even though now I know what's coming. And as soon as I started reading it, I messaged him back. And my flat report usually for anything startling is UGH exclamation point, which I think is, ugh, right? So I sent him, ugh. I said, what a beautiful story. I immediately mentioned it to Dana. Have you heard of Theo of Golden? I forget whether she said she had or hadn't, but we have friends in common who had read it, who had put it out on Facebook. Hey, have you read this book? You should read this book. One of my old professors from college from back in the 90s, he has a little book club. I'm a part of the book club and have never read one of his books because I don't read those kinds of books. I went back. He suggested this book months ago. And so I went and I found the old post and I said, I just started this book. He said, finally. He said, I'd look forward to seeing what you think of it. And I'm not even done with it. I'm almost done with the book. But it's a beautiful story, and it is impactful. Lots of books are entertaining. Some are really good. Some just kind of get you in the heart. And this is one of those books. But it's not about the book. It's the fact that Brian read it and shared it with me. I have things that I get excited about. Apparently, back in the 90s, I took any and every opportunity to talk about hockey. So much so that a kid I hadn't seen for 25 years remembered that. How obnoxious must I have been back then? I want to be known for something. And it's not going to be for knowing 80s culture and when Phil Collins' birthday is. I don't want it to be for my excitement about the best donut place in town or the best buffalo wings place in town. We're going to be known for something. The word evangelism sometimes gets I give it a bad name sometimes because it's like a program. We've got to learn a bunch of stuff to then spit out on everybody. But really, evangelism is one beggar telling another beggar where to find bread. It's one hot, thirsty kid with a pocket full of freezer pops telling everybody else where the cooler is. And it's one guy who's read a book telling another guy, hey, you should read this book. We have the opportunity to tell people not about our church. I love when you talk about the church, by the way. I love that. But about Jesus. We tell people about Jesus. That's what Andrew did with Simon Peter. That's what Philip did with Nathanael. That's what the woman at the well did in John chapter 4. Hey, come meet a man that told me everything I ever did. That's what the man born blind did. He talked about Jesus. That's what Matthew did. He invited his friends over and introduced them to Jesus. We're going to be known for something. It's not up to me to build this church. Thank goodness. It's not up to you either. It is up to us to do something with what's in our hands. And you've got a certain amount of influence. You've got people who know you that might not know Jesus. And if they know that you like 80s movies more than you do Jesus, there's something wrong. And if you follow me on social media and you know that I know all of the songs off of the 1986 debut album of The Outfield, Josie's on a vacation far away, come around to talk it over. If you know that I know that, but not that I know Jesus, then something's off. And we together need to point the way to him clearer and better and more consistently. I wonder sometimes if we really do believe that the gospel is good news for the world and we don't share it. Well, why not? If we really do love Jesus like we say we do and we don't tell people, why not? If we really do say because of Jesus we love our neighbors, but we don't reflect Jesus to them, what's wrong? Why, when we open up on Sunday mornings, when somebody opens the door over here, the first one, why isn't there a line around the building? Because there are people who know that I like Little Debbie's more than they know perhaps that I love Jesus. And I've dropped the ball. And I need to do a better job at that, and probably you do too. I heard it said one time that it's not up to us to feed the 5,000. I can't do that, and neither can you. But it is up to us to offer up our 5 loaves and 2 fish. Here's what I've got. Jesus, do something with this. We have influence. We have a voice. We have a platform. Some of us are platforms, social media, your influence at work, your influence with your family, your friends. You've got a platform. I wonder what we do with our platforms. I know Scott's a car guy. If I ever need a car guy, I'm going to Scott. I'm going to go to Ron. I'm going to go to Scott. If I've got a car question, I'm going to them. I don't know nothing about nothing. If you need to know about 90s hockey, Scott, you come to me. If you've got a chick book recommendation, don't bring it to me because I don't read those kinds of books. But Theo of Golden was awesome. I'm just impressed, not even about the book. I'm just impressed that somebody brought it to me and shared it with me, and it's made a difference. How much more might we do that for the kingdom? Would you stand up with me? So next Sunday, Daniel chapter 5, we'll come back. But yesterday on our way home, as I was listening to this book, the book is good, the book is powerful, the book spoke to me, but more so that somebody just went out on a limb and thought, I should tell Rich about that book. And I appreciate that. Many people have told me about Jesus. I've had the opportunity to tell others about Jesus. Some of you all might know some good donut places in town. You need to tell me. I know where the good buffalo wings are in town and where the buffalo wings are in town. We talk about what we're excited about. Let's talk about Jesus. Pray with me. Jesus, thank you that, so many people talk to me about Jesus. Not just one person, not just mom and dad, not just people at church, but so many people have shown me Jesus. and we have an opportunity to tell others. And it seems like new believers are the best at this. New believers like Andrew immediately went and told his brother. Philip immediately went and told Nathaniel. Matthew was invited to follow you and immediately invited all of his friends over. Sometimes, like me with hockey in the 90s, it just kind of grows dim and grows stale, and I get less excited about it. God, would you help us not to do that with grace, with forgiveness, with Jesus, with the church? For those of us who have been around for a while, it just seems that we get a little cold, a little numb to it. It just is where we go on Sundays and we lose that special feeling about being together with the family of God. God, would you help us to point the way to Jesus and invite people to come and be a part of the family that the church, not just this church, but that the church represents. In your great name we pray. Amen.